Ladies and gentlemen, just welcome to Real Talk today. Here with Jack, Ben, Paul. My name's Leon, and today's topic is social chemistry. So take it away, boys.
Sweet.
Thanks, Leon.
Hey everyone, what's going on? Yeah, welcome up to our guest, Leon, to the show.
Welcome, Leon. Okay.
Yo.
Nice. So
So social chemistry, huh?
Yeah.
You want to share what's going through your head right now with social chemistry?
Me?
You, Jack?
You, Jack? Yeah, sound like you have some dirty laundry, bro.
Yeah.
Okay. I guess for social chemistry, it's really interesting, how humans behave around humans, whether is it in work culture or in the church culture or just in society, right? And I'm always curious how the human mind works and what motivates a person or demotivates a person. So with social chemistry, probably we'll just maybe look more into the Bible to see what the Bible actually talk about social chemistry and how humans interact with humans and how Jesus uses wisdom to interact with people as well. And speaking of which, I'm always curious if Jesus actually felt lonely. Because being God, coming to human as a human form, he would probably experience loneliness, sadness, and even maybe depression, right? Like on the cross, he was so torn. The fact that God has kind of abandoned him, right? Because God couldn't save him. He had to go through the cross, right? So that itself was probably when he experienced the most intense and immense pain and suffering, right? Which is what we experience all those kind of emotions, right? So social chemistry is quite an interesting big topic, and maybe we can each of us share a little bit of our insecurities as human being, as a Christian, as a person, and maybe look into the Bible to see what does the Bible actually tell us about this stuff that we go through. Yeah. For Ben, maybe you want to share about insecurities that you face, or Paul or Leon, and how do you guys cope with those stuff?
Well, the way you said it, it sounded like I had a bunch of dirty laundry to air. It's I think it's a very sort of interesting topic, because when we let's go back to the Bible for a second here, as we ultimately should. If you think about, I think in some way, the immediate story that I have in mind was there's a couple, and I think the first one, maybe let's go look all the way in John 4, chapter 4, the very famous story about the woman at the well, right? And what I found out in my, later years, understanding that piece of scripture as older, was that there's a reason why she actually came to the well at noon, because she couldn't handle the criticism around people. And so, because apparently, of course, she was living a bit of a scandalous life. But Jesus, in his, most graceful attitude as always, decided to chill at the well, wait for this woman to show up and say, "Hey, woman, wanna fetch me some water?" And the woman's like, "Who are you, bruh?" And then Jesus is like, well, then he made it very clear that he is the Son of God, right? And so, in a weird way, I think that kind of is a very surface sort of, understanding of how sort of society does, especially at that time and in that culture, where they really, look down upon, people like that, right? Or even look at another way where I had a different story. It was the Good Samaritan, right? The first guy was who's the first guy? Was he a Levite or a priest?
Oh, what are you talking about?
The parable of the Good Samaritan. There's three people. Obviously, the last guy is a Samaritan.
Right.
The second guy was a Levite, actually. Who's the first guy?
I see. Right.
Yeah. So anyway, the whole point is that the reason why I think the last part was a Samaritan was that Samaritan people didn't like them, because Samaritans were apparently they were a hybrid in their blood. So the Samaritan people were kind of not, I wouldn't say as far as second class, but they were sort of the race of people, or the group of people that people were like, oh, they kind of had stigma around them, right? So I think Jesus painted a very beautiful picture of, the Samaritan guy who wasn't just graceful, but he went the second mile. He provided for this beggar and brought food and shelter, made sure he was okay, even gave him his donkey or his camel, I believe. And so I think the whole social structure in that point was very fascinating, right? I don't know if it really talks about, the social chemistry in that way, but I think there's a social implication there, right? To me, I think having social chemistry is absolutely, I think, something that we as Christians have to be mindful of, because, of course, there is a side of us innately in our sin nature would want to gravitate towards, going with people that we're comfortable with, hanging out with people that we should. But at the same time, what really pushes us is the idea about going to spread the gospel to the ends of the earth, right? Doesn't matter what your background is, doesn't matter how your story is. I think as you mature in your faith, you come to realize that everybody just has a different life story. And I think as followers of Christ, we have to respect that in God's sort of grand design, but also at the same time, socialize with people, right? And not worry about how we feel, but actually worry about how other people feel. Because some people, maybe they just want to be heard or want to be talked to, right? Or even just want an audience to listen, regardless of whatever topic. Maybe you just got to be there to be listening ears. That's why maybe some say that listening is just as important, or if not even more important than just speaking, right? I think James talks a lot about listening, us be slow to speak, be quick to listen, right? And so that's sort of just my short little spiel about I think the understanding of social chemistry.
Wow, that's very good, really good. Okay, and second question to pose for you guys is, how would you think that as believers we can involve non-believers into our social circle? So, it's an open question. How could we involve our work colleagues or just people that we meet elsewhere into our social Christian circle? Yeah.
Right. I think it's pretty. I guess one thing I think about is, just how interesting a place the modern sort of social structure is in it. Because nowadays, when you think about, just meeting people, the people in general, you always have this idea of sort of the social circles, and
Please.
Different. You have a different circle in one place and another, right? You've got your church friends, and you've got work friends, and you've got maybe high school friends, and maybe another random group that's not really that's just just kind of forming out of somewhere completely different. And it's just kind of interesting how there's even such a thing as a circle, you kind of wonder how it was back in, I don't know, back in Jesus' day, right? It doesn't, the impression I get is that, the circles aren't as clearly defined, something about, Jesus he was just able to float around, right, with everybody, right? It was as if the line wasn't there, you didn't really need to, you didn't really need to kind of jump from the, the noble circle of friends, the nobleman circle of friends to, to the tax collector circle of friends, and to the, leper circle of friends. There were no lines like that, right? It just, or at least to him, it was all just sort of he just kind of, the connection was there. He didn't need to pierce a wall or anything, right? Which is one thing I just kind of find myself, really, I ponder it a lot, because, I mean, like, I like growing up for me, like, I was a pretty, introverted guy, right? But even there, I felt like is kind of, it felt like an illusion because, sure, I was super shy, but I felt like, I don't have to, like, I mean, I know I can connect with people, right? I don't know why I'm so shy, right? Like, but I was, right? And there was a part of me where it was kind of like Jesus was saying, like, yeah, like, you definitely have it in you to just, be able to connect with people like I do, right? Like, yeah.
Jesus telling you to break the fourth wall.
The fourth.
I guess. I mean, if there's a fourth, like if life was like a storybook, like if life was a storybook, and yeah, I'm talking to the reader right now.
Okay, man. Who's to say that God isn't the ultimate author?
Or maybe, that's actually a. You've kind of got my mind kind of firing off right now. But yeah, I don't know. Like, yeah, the idea, like, I mean, you kind of bringing up the idea of social chemistry is just so interesting because I think a lot of us think about it, and I definitely think about it, and I feel like, as I've kind of grown as a believer, the chemistry for me has kind of changed a lot. Like, I'm finding like I'm kind of in a place now where like my relationships are a lot more playful, right? Yeah. Even a lot of my long-term ones, like, I love it, right? And yeah, I just find myself sort of, praising God that, he can transform relationships like that. So
do you think
that's
that
kind of a long answer to you, the question you brought up?
It's good though, because it's different perspective of like social chemistry within the Christian circle. But I've always wondered, like, what about like other religions? They have their own social circle too, right? So what about those folks who get left out, or they are left out of social circles? Right? How do they get their own social? Like, how does the chemistry thing works with them? Because, like, even the Bible, there's many people who get left out, but Jesus is always find his way to those folks, right? So, yeah, it's a really big topic. So it's like very gray, like a lot of ambiguity on the actual topic. What about Leonard though? Like, what's your thoughts about just social chemistry itself, Christian world, secular world?
It's tough because, I think probably in a secular world, with social chemistry, you almost kind of think of a sexual chemistry, basically, right? Because that's basically, I think, what people kind of, aim for. Right?
That's sort of very North American like,
right?
culture.
Yeah, yes. I mean, sort of, more or less, right? I mean, that's like usually what, 90% of the guys kind of gravitate towards you, right?
Yeah, okay.
So, and of course I'm generalizing, I apologize out there if I'm like being too stereotypical, right? But I think innately there's some kind of truth there, right? And that's why in a social, or even at least, or even in a different sense, in the social circles, what do I have to gain if I hang out with a bunch of rich people? It's like, what do I have to gain? Or if I hang out with some, beautiful person, so what do I have to gain from it? So it's about what I innately can benefit, right? Not really about, and it's so flip side, because if you look about the Bible, it's so opposite, right? If you really understand Jesus' mission, then it's like, okay, how can I love you better? How can I serve you better? How can I be a better? It's such a flipped like thing, right? If you look at the principles of the Bible, everything is so opposite, right? It's so opposite. Like it's crazy, that same idea about, if you get slapped on one cheek, hey, we'll offer you your other cheek, right? Well, instead of walking just 1 mile, why don't you go 2 miles, right? It's like it's counterculture, but I think in a strange way, that's why, rebels for Jesus is kind of a interesting kind of joke that our my circle of friends kind of joke about, right? Funny how I brought out the word circle. But I think the idea behind that is, the social chemistry, it has to also reciprocate too. And it is true that who you put yourself around does kind of define who you are, and also changes sort of, you know, how you are, because innately it does affect you, I think, and also affects the people around you, because you also gravitate towards the people who are kind of like you in a strange way too, right? But again, I think being Christ followers, it kind of shifts our thinking, because we're called to do something greater, right? And I think Jesus really points us the way. I mean, I'm always thinking back as Paul was sharing about how Jesus was chilling with tax collectors, Pharisees, sharing a meal. I'm like, what kind of social chemistry did he have with those guys, right? Like, you know, apparently he spent hours like hanging with these guys, right? So it's like you kind of have to wonder what on earth is happening, right?
And you also, like, you know, like you're like you somehow you just know that, you know, everyone really had a good time. And like, you know, that's one thing I just find, like, I just, you know, kind of find myself in awe of, right? Because to know, like, I mean, for someone to be able to connect with virtually everybody is, you know, probably the most amazing thing in the world, right? Like, you know, because, you know, that's what heaven is about, right? Just knowing that, you know, knowing that you have a place that, you know, that matters to everyone and everything, right? Like, that's, you know, for it to be possible for you to be completely known and to know everyone else, right? Like, that's, you know, that's just heaven, you know, in a sort of, you know, in a really condensed form, in a sense, like, and yeah, like, you know, the like, you know, Jesus, yeah, like, I mean, he, you know, he's proof that, you know, a man can have that kind of love for his neighbor, right? Like, to, you know, truly understand someone, and to, like, and to you know, like, you know, his very life is very convincing, you know, proof, I guess, that you can do that for others as well, right? Like,
I have another question though. Like, you know, they say that people like who lack social interaction after a long time, they actually die. Like, no matter how like, it sounds really bleak, but
yeah.
So my question then is that, what if, like, we can't connect with people, right? Does that mean we are hopeless, right? Or if an individual can't connect with people, then they are hopeless, then, isn't it?
Well, I think, you know, like, that's, I mean, I think even there, that's part of what it means for us to have faith, right? Like, we need to believe that there is some kind of way, you know, and then
there's no way.
Well, I mean, even if part of you is thinking there is no way, you have to kind of, you know, like,
you take a step of faith, because I was actually listening to America's Got Talent, and this dude, he was giving like one of the greatest like cheesy one-liner acts. It was fantastic, but he said that he dealt with he battled I think anxiety, like intense anxiety, that he couldn't leave his house. He was very scared, right? But then through therapy and through this stuff, he realized that he overcame it. And in fact, he even was sharing, he couldn't even believe the fact that he was going up to the stage to do this, right? I mean, of course, I'm taking the story as it is, right? I mean, if people decide to overthink it or overlook it, or maybe it's some kind of shenanigans, that's up to you to decide whether the story is fact or not. I just take the face value, right? But anyway, the reason why I bring this up, because, you know, it is circumstantial and a little bit situational, but the whole idea is still there. The philosophy is, yeah, I agree with Paul saying you have to take a little bit of a step of faith, right? But also there's a knowingly an unselfish thing. You have to, I think, there's maybe a level of pride. Like, there's got to be a reason why individuals don't want to go and socialize. Are they scared of rejection? Or are they scared of maybe not finding the right group? Or maybe they're scared of how people view them, right? I mean, there's definitely a cause to that, right? I don't think it's not by accident that they don't want to do any of that. Maybe there's, you know, a barrier or a situation that perhaps have hurt them so much that they can't look past that, right? I think innately people are designed for relationships, designed to be around people, right? I mean, if that wasn't the case, then I think, apart from, Eve being created for many other things, I guess it's to create that sort of a relational building, right? And being around sort of people. Does that even make any sense?
Yeah, it's basically the gist of social chemistry.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, it's a big.
Well,
it's a
one
big
thing
topic.
well, one thing I meant I was going to add to that was that like I think even the name like social chemistry is a bit misleading.
Yeah. We'll rebrand this one.
Sorry.
We'll retitle this one.
Well, yeah. Well, because
Leon, jump back in. Sorry.
well, I mean, it can be misleading. I mean, is probably a better way to put it. Like, because because I kind of find as I've kind of going through difficult times, I guess like growing spiritually, that in a sense there can be two kinds of people in like when things come down to when it comes down to things, like there are those who kind of believe in the chemistry almost entirely. And if the chemistry starts not working, then they kind of, they just assume that the friendship's over, right? Or, they kind of write you off, right? And then there are other kinds of, friends that are like, if the chemistry starts getting a little messy, then they start, they kind of take a step back and look at where things are, right? And try to, kind of it's an opportunity to sort of you work a little deeper into things, right? Like and I think like yeah, like I mean chemistry can only take you so far, right? Like chemistry is fun if things are in the right, if all the atoms are kind of hitting things in the right, kind of if the chaos is kind of controlled and fun, there's all that bantering and stuff. Like it's it can be the best when the conditions are right.
Yeah.
But when things are out of control, nobody wants to, it's hard to take the responsibility to
be accountable for the results of things.
Yeah. And and especially in modern society, because nowadays everything is about kind of getting things in a package that works for you, right? Like, and that is very very customized and and very refined, right? So you don't really think about doing the hard work of understanding things, right? Like because since it's prepackaged, like the hard work should be done by other people, right? Like that's kind of how we think, right? But like chemistry, it's like science, right? Like it can be misleading, because sometimes we can use science to avoid taking the proper responsibility for things, right? Like so maybe you think you're an accident or something, so then you just live a kind of a reckless life, right? Like, or you think science shows that everything is just kind of chaos and and everything's meaningless, there's no God, and so you can let things just kind of go crazy, and you can have fun like in that process. And I don't know, maybe that's that I don't know if that's
actually
really.
I think the reason why I came up with the topic, or why social chemistry, like the thought of the topic, like was discovered, was because like I was just wondering, like I don't know about you guys, right? But for me, like this week, I felt like I didn't have any social, like meaningful conversations or meaningful interactions, right? So I was just wondering, like, like this generation is so different from like 2 generations ago, where pretty much our parents or our grandparents' generation went through the war, right? And then like those who were born after the war, they pretty much, when in this era of like things were very low, people didn't care so much about like money and like consumerism and stuff. But our generation is the generation of consuming, right? Is where like industries that peaked, you ever seen recession from '08 crisis, but pretty much people are just buying and trading across the borders about buying material stuff, right? And that's like the war and guarding your banking account information, your data information. So that's the thing, right? But it's so different because we are all so closed off individuals, not us, but like the society that we are in, right? And we all always think about money, houses and things and that. Whereas 2 generations ago, people barely even worry about this stuff, right? And that's why life were more simple, having family, having social communities, small communities, having food on the table, and just, they had very little education. But what they had was that human interaction was really in-depth and really close-knitted families, right? Whereas now, our generation is like, people get married and stuff, but they still feel like they're a bit isolated and like there's no meaning to the marriage, right? And things. So I think it's a generational crisis, right? But yeah, I'm still thinking about a solution to that problem. So
No, I definitely feel that too. Like, I mean, yeah, again, it's bizarre in the sense that, that we even have sort of social circles. I feel like, like why can't I just say hi to someone on the bus and just kind of have a conversation next to the person?
Oh my gosh.
Like, why not?
Big topic. Yeah. It's like when I used to take the train.
Like, I'm finding...
Yeah, go ahead, sorry.
I'm finding myself asking myself that question more. It's... I mean, and, the more I'm kind of sort of... the more I'm kind of... I don't even know how to put it. Like, it's just the more I'm just kind of
it gets you wondering, like
you're more self-aware because you realize that there is a pitfall or sort of a weird sort of a hole that's in a society's hierarchy.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
I think
totally.
it's also like I think part of it is about taking responsibility for relationships, right? Like, because a lot of times we only want to be in when it's fun, right? Like, but when you're sitting next to maybe someone who, like an elderly gentleman who maybe was in World War II or something, like, you like the chemistry doesn't exist yet, right? Like, maybe you have no interest in World War II, or you just don't know how, what kind of you would have in common with the older person. But, kind of taking responsibility for, for that relationship, right? Like, that's there, like, that's kind of a starting off point in itself, right? Like, you kind of, like, I feel like, you kind of have a responsibility to like know your neighbor in a sense, like not just love. Like, I mean, like it's not just about kind of having a feeling of affection or whatever for that person next to you, right? Just like, it's knowing someone is probably a lot more of a deep a lot more of a meaningful sort of connection than just
Can I add something?
having a feeling of
Sorry. When you were mentioning that, it brought up a podcast I listened to like early this week. He was saying that it was a TED Talk speaker, and he did an experiment. He was like, yeah, social interaction for our generation is really hard. People are not getting enough healthy, meaningful conversations, and they don't feel like they fit in well. So songs like Ed Sheeran with his new song like, "Oh, I Don't Fit In all the parties and stuff," is like trending because literally, man, our generation is the generation that people don't fit in most contexts. we don't fit in. We are like this sore thumb that's sticking out, and that's a fact, right? But
yeah, I think I was listening to that song and I was like, wow,
sure.
that's how I feel.
Everyone totally recognize and associate with that song, right?
Yeah, I didn't listen to it enough, so
smart.
I gotta go back.
What?
No, I just listened to it once and I was like, yeah, I know that feeling.
Wait, it's the one with Bieber?
I think so.
Bieber,
Is it? Okay,
the
yeah, I
one
didn't.
Bieber,
I was just
yeah,
trying
Bieber.
to like overlook how trippy the video was.
I didn't. I saw that. Yeah, the video. Was
I didn't watch
trippy,
the
yeah, it was
video
trippy.
because
Yeah.
it looked kind of trippy, so I didn't want to distract it.
Yeah, but it is one of the number one trending, and like the psychologists that talk about the social interaction. He was saying that we identify with it because everyone in our life there's surely a point where we felt out of place, right? And she was saying that they did an experiment. People who are basically lonely or isolated, right? They actually thrive, right, in desperate times. So, for example, like during the war, people actually became closer. Communities were formed, like cliques, gangs, and rebel groups were formed because they identify with each other, the struggles that they were going through association, right? And she was saying that they did an experiment where they gathered people who are either convicts, ex-convicts, drug rehabilitation people and stuff, and they formed their own community, right? And for once, bam, suddenly the circle, like what we mentioned earlier, the circle was forged and formed, where people will be calling in and checking in on each other each day to see how they're going. They're having actual conversations, sharing about the struggles, sharing about the challenges in life, and just being there for each other, right? And they might not have money, they might be, recovering from addiction and stuff, but the fact that they had a social, like brotherhood or sisterhood and stuff, it strengthened their mental, physical, and emotional, psychological health, and they all actually recovered. Surprisingly, they all recovered together as a group, and it shows and proof that, like, humans, they do well in groups. They can't survive alone, right? And they actually form closer connections when they are actually going through challenges. Right, so that's the thing where, like, it gets me thinking, like, with like the social culture we have right now in society, it's like instead of being able to identify with people and like coming together as a group, right, we end up like pushing people away, if it makes sense. Obviously, there's interest group like sports group, like badminton, kayaking, hiking, and stuff, where you can form and forge like interest group connections, but those kind of stuff are not actual stuff, life challenges that people go through, whatever, right? Obviously, if you have an addiction problem, you can go and seek addiction counseling, whatever. But what I'm trying to say, like, is finding a day-to-day, like, buddy or a pal that you can just hang out with and do life or do things, right? And that itself, yeah, people say it takes time and all that, but to be honest with you, I think the true issue is that it's not a matter of time, because if it's a matter of time, you would have people would find friends already, and then isolation is actually the number one problem across all Western country, right? Isolation and loneliness, right? So, and there's the statistics in America that they say 60% of the young people in America actually suffer with isolation and loneliness. 60% is a huge number, right? So
technology doesn't help either, because
Yeah.
I don't mean to cut in, because I just realized that in a strange way, when Facebook first started off, and there's no, I mean, I'm not trying to condemn like Facebook. I'm just trying to sort of play out a real situation. At least I'm noticing, even within myself or the people around me, is yeah. When it first came out, I was like, cool, everybody's connecting. Suddenly, you felt very, you would talk to people, or even it would be cool. But then as time went on, it evolved. At Facebook, honestly, it evolved to what it was. It wasn't like it was before. Now it's just, you have tons of friends, but do you really have that many friends? You might have just met that one person, and you just kind of add, and okay, cool. But the idea is that I think because of the more social media outlets there are, the less social I think people become.
Exactly.
Because technology has allowed people to find different ways of access, and it becomes like a self-driven thing. I mean, that's why I think when people post all these selfies and Instagram, is like they got to be presentable. There's, again, it's created a different kind of social aspect that you kind of have to wonder if it's deviated so far that can we ever come back to it? Because nowadays, we were joking, I think, with a bunch of aunties earlier at church, how or even yesterday at our fellowship group, when one of the aunties noticed that a bunch of us were on our phones, and she goes, "Are you guys talking to each other?" We're not, right? But I've seen it too firsthand.
I was messaging Corey.
Well, I wasn't gonna mention anything, but since you outed yourself, Paul, then yeah, congrats to you, bro. Yeah, nice. Who would have thought that there was a martyr in my group other than
we
me?
all know who we were talking about.
Yes. Oh, I wasn't pointing fingers, but since you volunteered, yeah. But the idea was that, yeah, it's like, it's so sad. I've seen some kids too actually talk to each other, even at the same dinner table, just through their phones. I'm like, seriously? And so maybe we're fortunate enough to be in a generation where we kind of see the how technology, the sort of in between, where we're not letting technology drive the whole way, but of course we're trying to use technology to genuinely use for its purpose, right? But again, the idea is that now it's evolved so much that I think it arguably has changed the way social chemistry is understood.
Exactly.
Because
even with Snapchat, Snapchat is so gross. Like when I first heard of Snapchat, I didn't get it. But then most of the young folks, they're like, no, people actually date through Snapchat. They get the Snapchat IDs and they start dating through Snapchat.
Oh, snap.
And I'm like, how do you even date through Snapchat? And like, oh, they send flirtatious pictures and emojis and stuff. And I'm like, oh, wow, like dating is like, yeah, it's a whole different level. And I'm like, I totally don't get how Snapchat works. It's just too much for me to understand. And yeah, it's like, wow, like what happens to actual interaction, right? And there's another psychological podcast. I think this was by the ABC channel or something, and they talked about how like dating
you've been
profile.
Listening to a lot of podcasts.
I know, I know, I'm guilty as charged. Like this week was like,
Clearly,
Hey,
Jack is
why
like
not? Why
craving a
not?
different social interaction.
it's different. Oh wow, but yeah, I guess we're all kind of the
Hey,
same,
I
but
mean,
just
like-
be afraid to
Yeah.
admit it. What?
Yeah.
Snapchat, man.
No, I don't know. I was just saying, like, there's a lot of it's really interesting to hear a lot of different perspectives on in a podcast, like where when people share like their sort of their opinion
Experience
on
or opinions or thoughts,
experience.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, so
Yeah.
nobody's giving you a hard time for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're nearing 45.
Okay. Yeah,
so
let's go.
we should
Call it.
Yeah.
Okay. So how are we going to end
But
it?
there is
there
one
any
thing.
conclusion?
One thing. Sorry, but there is one thing I think I want to
Lay out there.
sort of share, I guess. I guess when I hear
5 seconds
about
left.
people who are kind of this 45, not 40.
Okay.
So there's still
Quick.
that's fine.
Okay, now just burning through your time, bro.
2 minutes
That's
left.
fine. No. Like on ours, it's 40 minutes left. Or sorry, 5 minutes left. So that's fine.
It's fine.
Yeah. Okay. Anyways, so I mean, because I do feel like there are a lot of people that kind of have a hard time sort of connecting, or like kind of finding a place, I guess. And I mean, it's something I'm kind of very conscious of, I guess, because I think when I was young, in high school and early university, I had maybe like one or two close friends, but it was kind of hard for me to kind of go outside that, and I never I just didn't really know why. I tried to meet other people, but and then I'd watch other people. Like I had a close friend who was basically friends with everybody, and he just able to connect with everyone. And I just, that was pretty amazing to me, right? Like it's just that he can he's able to I don't know how to put it, gosh, I don't even remember my point now.
Probably.
I'm sorry.
The word is the life of the party, right? So wherever he goes, he's able to connection, the brief but intriguing connection with people, right? But I think for himself as well, usually those kind of folks, they themselves don't get actual meaningful conversation. They're able to intrigue a lot of people, but they don't maintain relationship well, right? So that could
is
be the downside.
True. and with this particular person, I feel like now when I kind of reflect back on it, like there's a sense that he was able to sort of be fun with a lot of people, but there's almost a sense that he
Isn't truly
there's
himself.
a lot about him that people don't know.
Yeah.
I guess no, I mean not that there's bad secrets, but it's almost like
It's his different
he
personality.
seems like he could be a lonely person. Yeah, even though he has a lot of friends. But I guess the point what I'm trying to make is that I guess so when I became a believer in my university years, I was also very aware of just how I guess kind of even in Christian circles I kind of felt lonely. I went to the Christian clubs and stuff, and I just couldn't find it just I couldn't quite connect with anyone, I think. And I visited friends' churches and stuff, and it just I found it kind of hard to even though they were my good friends, but I just wasn't in their world, I guess. But so the church is not immune to the this whole circle problem, I guess. And there's a lot of churches, I think, where it just works simply because the chemistry works, and I guess that's good and bad, right? Because when the chemistry goes bad, what are you gonna do, right? But I guess one thing I've kind of found myself reflecting on is what a proper church would be like, right? I have this sense, there's this kind of vision in my head, that, when, if there's a place where, just randomly people can just, get together and instantly connect, that would be what the proper church would be like, right? If we, for example, if there's a little girl and, and an elderly lady and an old a man who feels he's pathetic because he's divorced and has a dead-end job, if they can just sit down on a table and just instantly sort of connect and actually have sort of a deep sort of vulnerable conversations with each other and just have fun with each other in each other's just be present with each other, right? I think that's that's where the church, the kingdom has arrived at that church, right, in a sense. And that's that's sort of I'm always when we work in or when we do ministry things, that's it's just there. I'm always sort of conscious we're working towards that. So that was a thought I I just felt I'd like to put into just put out there as well. So
Cool.
yeah, that's all I have to say.
Nice. I think we've kind of covered the topic really well. What about Leonard? Why is he so quiet?
Oh, he doesn't actually have a mic.
You can share a mic. Jump on.
You want to say something? Say a word or two or a sentence?
I don't know. It's that you guys touched on so many different aspects, but I think the reason, or one of the reasons why we find it so hard to connect with one another is because we're so focused on social chemistry and the aspect of what do I have in common with this person in terms of my interests, my hobbies, our personalities. But I think even if you look at the early church, they shared everything. They shared in their struggles with one another. And I think that's something we find really hard to do today, to be honest with our struggles. Even with our really close friends, it's hard to be honest. And it's that whole Instagram mentality that my life has to look put together from the outside. I traveled here, I did this, and I look like this. But it's we find it really hard to just get real with one another. And I think that's why, or that's one of the causes of, not feeling like we're able to connect with one another. And I think just in terms of social chemistry, we're all human. We're all looking for like people that are similar to us, that we can hang out with and feel comfortable with. But I think it matters a lot. Like if we look at the example of Jesus, like he didn't have anything in common with the people that he hung out with. And I think, each of us has a different calling, but we're all called to, kind of lay that desire to have people that are common to us, lay that down and just, be open and, connect with people, like even if they're the furthest thing from what you are. Because that's the example that Jesus gave us, to go look the widow, the orphan, the leper, the outcast. And so, yeah, I think it matters a lot less in that aspect, but it matters more in the sense that, we connect in our struggle, like you were saying too, Jack, that's kind of what brings people together is, struggle, sharing struggles. So, I don't know. That's just what I gather from the conversation.
Man, I love your spill. It was like really different perspective. It's like fresh perspective or fresh.
Dude, that's like, yeah, Leon's a guest. Dude, that's a big mic drop, man.
Yeah.
I like that. It's good.
Mic drop. Yeah.
I think that's a good closing note.
Oh, wait, pause. Another question, with the last one. This might lead to the next topic of the podcast, is that, okay, now we totally uncovered the chemistry and the fundamentals behind social interaction and social chemistry. But how do you deal with people who are so afraid of social interaction? So, like, obviously, let's say you can tell someone that's probably struggling or going through something, right? And then you're just being there as a human, right? Talking to them and trying to find out how they are doing as an individual, right? But for some reason, they're always shutting everyone out, right? So how do you deal with people that way, right? You just leave them by themselves to suffer, or
You get in their face, get up their grill.
what? Get up to the face.
I think it's a fine balance, because I could think of some people, at church that kind of are like that. And I don't know, it's like you just treat them like anyone else. You just try to talk with them. It's really up to them if they want to respond to you or not. But I think it's, your responsibility to, again, reach out to people who are, socially awkward or outcasts or whatever. And you can't really control how that interaction's going to go. And it might feel really awkward. And you might feel like a real, kind of
But what if the person is really attractive?
Even more reason to do so.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree with that. I think it really boils down to the key of, no matter how bad this person, either, maybe they're just really scared of you. I'm kidding. But the idea is that I think being available.
I think you're just gonna complicate the situation even more.
Yeah, make it super uncomfortable, and you're just gonna look like you come off very predatorial.
So you'll be you'll be saying to her, is there a reason you're not talking to me that you actually secretly like me?
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's like the weird child. It's like when you're a kid, you'd be like a girl, you just be super mean and just No, but I think it goes back to what Leon was saying, how it really is about being available. I think being available and letting the other party know that, hey, you're always gonna be there, because even though you may come off a little bit annoying, but I think there's probably a level of security and assurance, the fact that, hey, there's actually someone there who's willing to support or willing to be there, right? And so, yeah, I think sometimes if that person's not or waiting at least for an opportunity to be vulnerable, I think it's okay if you want to just be vulnerable first, say, hey, I'm just screwed up, right? I'm super messed up, right? But that's the beauty of why we all need, Jesus' grace. I think going back to what Paul mentioned about how, the way I see it now is that there's only two categories of people in society. Only two categories of people: the saved and the unsaved. That's it. That's it. That's the basic, right? This is the most basic as you can get it to.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
Well, I mean, speaking of people we kind of know, there are people like that in my mind, and I mean, I think now that I'm older and I still deal with a lot of younger people, because I work in with people, a lot of young people, in my industry, right? And also, like, just have friends that just happen to be like pretty young and cousins and stuff. And yeah, I kind of not surprised, I guess, but there are many times when I kind of realize like they're they're kind of looking for someone to connect with, right? Like, and some of them will say it in more subtle ways, and some will be a little more overt and say, they kind of are looking for a mentor or something, right? And then there are people that actually just like that are almost as if they have no interest in kind of connecting with anyone, right? Like they seem kind of annoyed that they even have to try. And but and at this and like I kind of find my when I kind of come across a situation like that, I find myself
asking what would Jesus do.
Well, I mean, that goes without saying. Yeah, that's a good point, actually. That's kidding.
Or next cat, what would Jesus do?
No, but like, one like I mean, go kind of like thinking again on the term social chemistry. Like on the one hand, I think it's kind of dangerous to think of it as the most important thing, like to only live for social chemistry. But on the other hand, I think it's also important to respect it, because social chemistry, when you tame it, is probably the most fun thing in the world, right? Because that means how to interact with people, right? If you're only going to get yourself be thrown around by the chemistry, you never really learn how to there are sort of multiple layers to that chemistry, right? It's not just about being kind of lost in it, right? And there are people that I'm aware of that I don't have that chemistry yet, right? And when I'm around them, I'm I kind of keep the interaction to a minimum, and I feel like that kind of communicates respect, right? Because I respect the fact that they're not quite in the place where that chemistry works yet, right? And part of what my job is as an older person, and also as well, I own where I am in life, right? When you're older, you have responsibilities, right? And as a believer, right? I have to, part of the puzzle is to understand, what I can do to affect that chemistry, right? Maybe there's something I can change that will suddenly make the chemistry work. And I'm actually surprised that it has a number of times that actually has made a difference, right? I haven't really seriously tried that until a little later in my spiritual life, I guess. But I think again, this is a very multi-layered thing, right? Part of there are extremes that people can go to, right? People can say, oh, you should be loving your neighbor and being completely blind to where they are, right? And just throw it on them even if they don't want it, right? And then there's the other extreme where you're just saying, oh, it's all about the fun, don't waste time with people who are gonna make your life hard. Yeah. So and like so many times in our faith, it's kind of a middle road, right? It's a very balanced you're not going left or right, right? You're going forward.
I think okay, speaking of which, this is kind of clear cut. If there are people who are like that, and you try your best, and at the end of the day, if they're just gonna lock you out of their own bubble, so be it, right? There's only that much you can do. So with social chemistry, I think what you're saying is really helpful. Like, we have to be able to manage it and not get bummed up and down by the chemistry itself, because the chemistry is only that much, right? It fluctuates based on the person's feeling, right? So
Yeah.
I mean, the reason why I'm asking, because given this leadership position, and I'm training like 20 staff, it's very hard for me because I have to be like their father, kind of like micromanaging everything, at least for now, right? And I feel like I need the social interaction. I feel drained. And I mean, like, yes, we depend on God for strength and stuff, but at the end of the day, I'm still human. So I crave social interaction too, which I've been lacking for the last 2 weeks. So
I think Leon has something to share, but yeah, I want to bring up, or this reminded me of an example that our pastor brought up, Pat, last week. He was talking about how, in chemistry, there is, oil and water, right? And no matter what you do, it just won't mix, no matter how hard you try and to shake it and to force it to. But, sometimes getting it to work means changing the chemistry, right? So you add in an emulsifier and then suddenly it combines, right? Like, so, there's, interesting little scientific little, yeah. Or I guess it's the same kind of thing, right? Anyways, Leon, you have something you'd like to add to this?
Oh, I think just piggybacking off what you said, like, it's important for us to read the situation. Like, there's two ends of the spectrum. There's like, if we're still talking about a person like who doesn't like social interaction, there's two extreme responses. One is to just continually talk to them over and over every time, regardless of how they feel, and the other one is just to leave them and ignore them because you guys aren't compatible, so just leave them. So what Paul was kind of saying is like, to be able to read the situation and to go on that. Like, there's some relationships maybe that like are not meant to be developed, like they're not ready to be developed at this time, or maybe never. So it's important for us to be wise in that, like, to kind of discern, like, maybe it's better to just be silent with this person. Like, maybe just be present, but don't say anything, or not talk to them at that time, or talk to them. So I think it's important for us to be wise in that sense and discerning what our interactions should be.
That's very true, though. It's very smart, because I guess that logic does apply for our workplace or in a professional setting, because you won't be able to click with everyone, right? And there might be those people who an individual will find it hard to click with them for some apparent reason, right? And at the end of the day, if you try it, then so be it. If it's not working out, it's not working out, right? You can't do anything. But I guess, everyone's at the different stage of their lives, or maybe going through different things. So obviously they're portraying a different thing, or they're not portraying or showing different things that is happening, right? So humans are really bizarre creatures, which is why social media is actually doing a disservice for us, because it shows only like a small fragmentation of our individual life, right? Which is not accurate, because most of the time, just in a single day, a person might be going through 10 to 20 different things that's happening to them at a given time, right? So social media it's not accurate for actual social interaction or actually getting to know someone. You have to meet them face to face. You need to have like one-on-one conversations to get to know that individual, right? And
so that's why I was on my phone yesterday. Like, it was just so interesting looking at people like publishing their life, fantasy life. Sometimes it's nice to get lost in seeing a fantasy sort of lifestyle coming up. Yeah. Like, our friend is in Japan, and she and her husband, and they're doing, like, they're just going around, trying all this amazing looking food, and they're talking about it. I mean, like, like it's it's just, you can live vicariously through people, right? That's the magic of social media. But,
even more crazy. I just thought of a really intense idea that I don't know if people are going to follow. Maybe I should just start the revolution. Okay. Can you imagine if you go into Facebook or Instagram each day and just posted like a sin that you're struggling with and just do it. Throw yourself out there to the point where it gets real. Regardless of whatever happens, and you say bandwagoners, and you just basically start to get real public.
It's radical.
Yeah, it's super radical. Can you imagine if you did that? Or you just deal with like a face of reality or a situation that you go and win, and to show people, hey, you don't have it all together, right?
People are just gonna be like TMI.
Yeah, right. Then you have to realize, okay, when is okay?
Unfriend.
Yeah, maybe. Then you see. Hey, then you see. Okay, so people not to hang out with. But the idea is that you know how intense that would be if you flip it and you realize that, hey, instead of having it all together, what if I'm trying to show people that the reality is that I don't have it all together, right? That'd be intense. That'd be super intense. It'd be the point where Zuckerberg's like, yo, bro, man, you gonna be alright?
It's like you're destroying Facebook.
Why don't you start us off, Parson?
I don't know.
So what sin are you struggling with?
Oh no, I'm outed. I need to start a separate Facebook account. I need to wipe my identity. Yeah, it's fine.
But hey, wait, there's another question for a third podcast. Because you see,
Oh
if the
my
fact,
goodness.
hang on, if the fact is that humans can
Okay, one
can't
more
deal with
thing. 'Cause
suffering.
it's getting pretty long.
Huh? What?
Yeah,
So
man, we need to get some more-
one more items because it's getting pretty long.
Yeah, okay. This will be the last one, and we can cut it if it gets too long, and like part 2. I don't know, but
We have to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
because
But
it's
it's a
huge
lot of
topic.
work to kind of cut it.
Okay,
To decide what to cut.
let's cut it.
I
now.
never know what to
Yeah,
cut.
we'll cut it now.
Yeah.
Okay, let Leonard. Sorry.
Well, I'm not gonna cut most things. I'll just cut like mistakes, because well, I'm gonna upgrade the plan, so we don't have that time limit anymore. But yeah,
We're buying time. Time check.
So it's Leonard or Leonard?
It's
Leon.
full name's
Leon.
Leonard, but you can call me Leon.
Leon the Lion. Okay.
God. Leonard
Okay,
Kennedy.
okay.
It's so lame.
Right.
no,
Leon
he
can
took some time
close.
off from
Wait, I should.
fighting zombies.
I need to
in
say the topic
yeah,
before I
Europe
forget.
to,
And my secret girlfriend, Ada Wong.
He's also
yeah,
thirsty for Claire.
and like talking about social chemistry. that's a whole
Not a good example.
that's a whole can of worms right there. Her and Ada going. Anyways.
Anyways, sorry about back to you, Jack.
Yeah. No, because I was wondering, you see, right, if human nature is that they try to avoid problems, like what Pastor was saying, we post problems on Facebook, people are just going to start avoiding. They're like, why are you so, like, sad and down all the time, right? But the question then is that, so which of the hypothesis is true then? Because actual relationships actually form during hardship. So if people are avoiding that, does that mean the society have changed? Like, society have changed to a point that now, like, the roles are reversed. We are designed by society to actually avoid meaningful conversations, and we actually flee meaningful conversations, and we actually isolate ourselves without even actually knowing it. Right? Food for thought. Because usually,
Well,
if
I
we
mean,
flee social
you know,
interaction, it's
yeah.
either for 2 reasons: out of
Right.
time or money. We don't have the time, so okay, I'm sorry, I can't give you a crap. I have to go. Why? Because they want to make more money, or there's something else to attend to that they value more, right? That could be back to money as well, a job, a project, or something, right? But when they have the money and more projects and stuff, do they actually feel happy? No, then they start yearning for social interaction, which they actually ditched a couple of weeks ago, right? So then it's a cycle, isn't it? Right. I think I did a wrong
No,
major.
I
I should be studying
agree.
psychology.
Yeah, I
But,
think-
I don't even feel like psychologists know how to solve something like this.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just think people are afraid, like, speaking for myself personally, I think it's afraid of meaningful conversation because you're afraid to be open with people.
But what's
'Cause
the worst
if
that could
any-
happen?
Rejection.
I don't know. Yeah, rejection, judgment. Yeah, I don't know. It's just, I think, yeah, society's more focused, especially Western. It's just like, do your own thing. Focus on your own things. Whatever makes you happy, whatever helps
Floats
you
your boat,
succeed.
whatever. Yeah. But then at the end of the day, everyone's at home by themselves, right? Because ideally, that's what the whole independent state of mind is about. You work, you have money, you're safe, then you get yourself a a small mini hole, and you stay there, and you shut yourself in there.
It's easy to be selfish, right? Like, just to think about yourself. What are your needs? Like, I'll stay at home, and if I need to hang out with people, I'll just hang out with, people, call them up or whatever. It's just easier that way, honestly. Like, it's not good, but it's just easier that way.
I feel like our modern economy is basically designed to work on that, right? Like, like it's all about being selfish. Like, it's about, like it's about, like capitalizing, people's selfishness, right? Like, even, like capitalizing, the friends that you have, and like, 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 you can be with people that you like, doing things that you love, and
Like our podcast. Are we capitalizing on our podcast?
I mean,
we're
Sponsored by
Ryan Seekers Airports International.
I don't know. Like, it's just where society is right now. Like, right? Like,
That explains why I'm still single and why you are still single.
What are you talking about?
Because the girls are so afraid of social interaction. And they keep, like, okay, see, right, in a relationship,
gets the most action.
if a girl find out that we have a problem, what is their usual instinct? Why do you have a problem? Oh no, he's not good enough, and bam, she's gone. Right. So that whole idea stems on modern society problems, right? But which is bad, and I think this podcast is indirectly addressing it. Is getting our viewers to think really hard, and if they're listening to this podcast like in the middle of the night, I don't think they can sleep. But we should be captioned.
I think it's getting us to think about our singleness really hard.
Yeah, I know.
Single AF.
I mean, that does keep me up at night. Just kidding.
Truth has been breached.
I'm just kidding.
Oh man, so many truths. On that note.
All right, folks. We've arrived at the end of our discussion of social chemistry. We hope you've enjoyed the discussion today. It's on behalf of Ben, Paul, and Jack. I'd just like to wish you guys well wherever your destination may be today or tonight.
Great. Thanks, Pilot Leon, for guiding us through our journey.
And it's Ben signing off.
And Paul signing off.
Jack signing off. Have a good one.
All right, stay frosty, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Roger Wilco.